Shoot, where's the volume? The sides.
Whoever needs to mute. Probably should do that before.
Terry's working.
Okay.
Good evening, it is 6:30 and I call the meeting of the Falmouth Public Schools to order for October 25th, 2022. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would like to remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded. If any member of the public would like to make an audio or video recording of this meeting, please notify me by raising your hand either in person or remote, and I will notify the public per the Massachusetts public meeting laws. Do we have anyone who is making a recording today? And please state your name for the record. Excellent, thank you, Deborah. Okay, mission and vision, Andrea.
Yes. Mission. The Falmouth Public Schools creates world-class student learning experiences. Our Clippers are empowered to pursue their goals with curiosity, integrity, and resiliency. And our vision. Clippers are creative, inquisitive, and engaged learners who participate in their community as socially responsible citizens. Clippers effectively communicate and solve problems that impact the world around them.
Thank you, Andrea. And fishbowl, Carrie.
Fishbowl. Okay. Maroon means we ask, what would make your school life better? And Samantha from the Morse Pond School, who's in 5th grade, said nothing. After our own hearts. Okay. White means what would make your school life better? This is from Grace, who's in 1st grade at East Falmouth School, and she said, everyone being kind and taking turns. From our kids.
Great, thank you, Sam and Grace. Next, public comment. Members of the public are welcome to speak about items that are not on the agenda. Comments should be limited to 2 minutes in length. Due to the open meeting law, there will be no debate or action taken on public comment items. For items on the agenda, the chair may accept comments from the public following the committee's discussion of an item. Additional comments and feedback can also be submitted by email to schoolcommittee@falmouth.k12.ma.us. Do we have any public comment, either in person or remote? Check our attendees. Okay, no hands. Okay. Going right through. The first item on our agenda was the student advisory, and like all high school students, our student is very, very busy. So we will not hear from the student this meeting, but hopefully next meeting we'll have someone lined up. So we're going to move right to the M.A.S.S Student Award and Reception. So I turn over to Dr. Dorr.
Always a very special agenda item, so I am very pleased. Carolyn, would you like to come up and join me? Sure. This is Carolyn Moscow. She is a senior at Falmouth High School. The award is it's the Academic Excellence Award, and it's Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents. And so one student is selected out of each high school. But before I'm going to hand this to you, I'm going to talk a little bit about you and all that. So you're going to have to kind of bear with me here. I'm going to start with her education. She has a GPA of 3.97. Her awards have been an AP Scholar with distinction. She has the Rensselaer Medalist Award. It's the Distinguished Award for Math and Science. We had the Harvard Book Award in 2022, the MIT J. Lim Foundation Award for Science. We have the Cape and Island All League Awards in 21 and 22 for tennis. So academic, and we have the athletics, but we also have Science Honor Society. She's Vice President, Math Honor Society Treasurer, Music Honor Society, a member of the National Honor Society. She also plays the flute. So she's been in the marching band for 5 years, so 8th grade, right? So 3 or 5 years, that's awesome. She also tutors the 4th grade in 4th grade, so she tutors in the band. There are so many things here, it's hard to pick. Including with the tutoring, she can do middle school math tutoring. Yes. She's been our extracurricular, she's on the high school math team for 4 years. And, you're the captain of the varsity tennis team. Yes, okay, that's good. All right, so just some more, I cannot stop talking, and we would be here all night for $3, but I just want her achievements. The State Science Fair Project winner for 2022. The State Region Math Team Championship for 2022. And back to her music talent in the All Cape for 2020 and 2022. So congratulations. And just a little piece that, I'm sorry, do you remember the presentation that we had on the CRISPR, the opportunity at NVL? So Carolyn, you participated in that. So we actually have someone that took part in that. So it's very exciting. Anything else that I didn't say you would like to share? No, that's fine. But your parents, you want to introduce your parents to everyone?
Oh, yeah, this is my mom, I'm also, yeah, that's my dad.
Anything you would like to add? Very, very proud of her, aren't you? All right, so I'm gonna award you this. Here's your certificate. It's the academic excellence. Thank you so much for being here. So at this time, we usually do a reception and we're ready in the hallway.
Yes, we're gonna move to a brief recess to celebrate Caroline. Is there a second?
Second.
And it will be a roll call vote because some of us are zooming. Mike?
Halen, yes.
Karen Deers, yes.
Andrew Thorold, yes.
Let's keep yes.
And Natalie Canal is also a yes, so we are in a brief recess.
So please join us, everyone, for some snacks in the hallway to celebrate.
And one, all right.
Great. Good evening. The school committee is returning from recess. We had a brief reception to celebrate Caroline Mosco, who was awarded the M.A.S.S. Student Award. The next item on our agenda, we are actually going to shift items, and we're going to move to the presentation of MCAS. So Dr. Dorr.
We're going to turn right over to Dr. Tanya for the MCAS presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excited to share with you where we are after our spring 2022 and presenting the format, the data in a similar format to how we presented it in the past few years, and then providing some highlights and next steps in response to the data for our instruction as we round up the presentation. So when we talk about the spring of 2022 MCAS data results, I think one of the most important parts that carries over from how the data was introduced to us from the Department of Education is that this is the new baseline. Just as much as the past couple of years have advised us not to make comparisons to the previous years and kind of thinking about the experiences through the pandemic, they have also advised that spring 2022 sets a new baseline for measuring achievement and growth moving forward. One of the other things, just kind of as we're moving into it, that I also think is important to share to preface the presentation of the data. I'm sure that you've seen or heard the headlines, the nation's report card being released and the NAEP results. And there's a lot of information being shared about where we are in terms of literacy and mathematics as a country. But one of the things I want to underscore, and I hope comes out in the data, is where Falmouth stands with regard to that, and seeing recovery in our results in math and science. So that differs from the national headline. It doesn't mean that we're fully restored to pre-pandemic rates, that we're coming close. And then also talking a little bit about our literacy and where we are. So I just want to share that a bit as a preface, and then I can make connections that as we go through or take questions on the other side. So as we typically do, we're going to start off with English language arts and look at our literacy data. So as we're thinking about our literacy data, what I wanted to first do was make a comparison and orient you to how the data is presented. So the Falmouth data, and this is looking at the aggregate, is presented in our maroon, clipper maroon. And then there's a paler sort of mauve version of it, which represents the state. So coming through here and looking at it, one of the headlines when the state released the data and met with the districts is looking at students' reading rates, response rates, and in particular struggles with developing written responses. So there are areas in which we've redirected attention around skills for written responses. That said, having the METAL framework and having a system that we use where we can identify parts of the writing and written instruction allows us to zoom in and look at very specific components, whether it's setting up the main idea or setting up the evidence that supports the main idea or drawing from the text. See, I'm working you through the METAL framework. Students are able to reference in on certain points. The other piece for us that we're really understanding and looking at this is not so much in reference to that NAEP piece in the headline, but references to our benchmark and our common assessments, and that students have the skills. It just sits with the automaticity, how fast they can recall them. And that's something we're working on in our instruction through our intervention model, but also in our foundations, our phonics and instruction, and trying to build towards those faster recalls of literacy skills. Our 10th graders, as you can see, have pulled ahead of the state by 9 percentage points. And again, this is representing the percentage of students who are meeting or exceeding. So they're above that proficiency benchmark. Just sort of walking through, we do recognize 3rd grade was a stand-up for us and one we're trying to look at of where 3rd grade is. It's true across the entire Commonwealth. There's a bit of a gap in the results for 3rd grade in a number of districts, and trying to understand where they were in their learning journey, because they're interrupted the 1920 year they were in kindergarten. And so they were just sort of moving into a lot of the solid learning routines in March, like the transition to school, as we were interrupted and rebuilding those. Looking at this represents the aggregate the composite of grades 3 through 8, but breaking down the student groupings for publicly available data. And you can see that our students across all of these different groupings have achieved ahead of the state. I'm going to come back and talk about a couple of our student groups when we talk about the bigger sort of headlines that are threaded in here for Falmouth in the end of the presentation. And then again, looking at grade 10 and the same level of comparison, Falmouth students continue to outperform the state. And then this number in particular is one I'm going to come back to because we've highlighted our students with disabilities at grade 10 the past couple of years, and they made another very significant increase. So tracking their success and looking at the strategies that are working for them. With the conversation about achievement, we also look at growth. This is a very different story from the colored table I was able to share with you last year. I'm starting to see recovery where we have a greater number of students across our different student groupings who are achieving moderate growth. We have not moved necessarily here back to high growth, but we are seeing higher achievement. So I think it's going to take time for that to recover and catch up. This is also the year where the state renormed their growth back to setting the 50% across the state. So they take the results, set 50% as the state right in the middle of the growth line, and then compare the districts to that. Whereas last year they had taken a different approach. So they're coming back to the approach that they had used for the 2019 and earlier results. And so when we look at that growth, we see that lighter line stay consistent at 50, and you can see the shift in growth. So our 7th grade students performed at the same level in terms of achievement. You can see they're a little bit behind in growth. So we're isolating the specific standards within here and providing additional opportunities for the writing instruction and digging into the different components of the writing. So we're going to look at the same presentation of data, but dig into mathematics. And again, across the state, this was one of the pieces that they talked about across the great majority of Massachusetts districts is the recovery in math and science. We're going to talk about science as well in a minute. But we can see the jump here. And in particular, in this slide, we'd like to call it as grade 8, because when we looked at grade 8 last year, grade 8 had performed, I think it was about 23 percentage points below the state. And so we were able to isolate, it was a pacing issue with the time of the test and where the standards were and the depth to which some of the standards were addressed. So going in and understanding that and resetting the scope and sequence has assisted us, but we have recovered where we're performing above the state level, and we continue to look at the curriculum there. But you can certainly see success stories across our grade levels with that comparative performance. And then when we look at the student groupings, our students still continue to outperform the state, and we've made significant gains again for students with disabilities over the state, but also that group of students each year over year, their performance, which, because you're comparing different groups of students, speaks also to the curriculum and instructional strategies, because in this case, we're not tracking them as a cohort. Here it is again in grade 10. So you just look at 3 through 8 students in grade 10. And one of the things that I want to point out here, although we were advised not to make too many comparisons to previous test results, our students, when we look at the aggregate grades 3 through 8, were 5 points higher than their performance in the spring of 2019. So pre-pandemic, uninterrupted. So, I mean, that's indicative certainly of the gains that we are making in math learning. And we understand that this is just a snapshot, but being a snapshot, I think our students also understand the weight this assessment experience carries. And when they enter the testing environment, they certainly are diligent and focused. So that's coming through here as well. And then again, looking at the growth, we're starting to see the tables almost all green. And then we're starting to edge into blue when we're looking at the growth that comes along with the achievement. So seeing high achievement, but also moving forward and seeing high growth, which is an indication of that level of skill recovery, which is the language that the Department of Education is using in talking about these gains in the spring 2022 MCAS. And so then, looking at the growth summary, again, with the state set at that 50, sort of finding the mid-level for all students who tested across the grades, you can see the comparison. And so this is significant, even though it's below the state at grade 8, the gains when we look year over year, last year to this year, is pretty significant for us. Again, it's so hard because I want to compare year over year, but then they advise you not to. So there's a few places where I had to dig a little deeper to make the comparison of last year, this year, because of what last year's results had told us. So continuing through the data tables and looking at science, technology, and engineering. Again, this test only occurs 3 times over a student's career as a Clipper. So grade 5 is the first time that they see the science, technology, and engineering. It's their 3rd year of M.A.S.S testing, but it's the first time they come across the science, technology, engineering, which is content driven. The math and the literacy are really in part testing content, but they're testing recursive skills that students have multiple exposures to. Whereas with science, it's a much broader content base, and it's testing over the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. So there's, some memorization in there. And then our high school students, we tested grade 9 in Falmouth. As many high schools do, you had a choice for 9 or 10. This is the first year that they took the next gen or the new version of the MCAS that measures on the meeting and exceeding, so we could follow across all tested grades. I didn't have to show you one type of test and then another. And you can see that we exceeded the state by 13 percentage points in meeting or exceeding, which is great to see the first time that we're starting out that our students understand the format and can access the test. And then similar to how we looked at the ELA and the math data, looking at it by the student groupings, how students are identified across all areas, we have pushed ahead of the state. So key points in our story, just to kind of call out. I just have to move my little Zoom box there so I can see them. So we know that Falmouth has historically been a high achieving district, and we also know that the pandemic took a toll on us. So one of the things that we're working to understand in this data, as well as our benchmark and common assessment data, is how we maintain that tradition of high achievement and how we help our students through the skills recovery. And shifts that we've made in our instruction, including, it's not tested at grade 1, but looking at our literacy instruction and using an intervention model that allows students to have more tailored and personalized instruction in their reading and in their phonics, so that there's opportunities for them to see shorter text that they connect with, that have topics that they like, and allow them to feel that level of success and move forward more quickly, which hopefully will then follow through the authenticity. They'll recall it faster. Again, featured snapshots. Couldn't help myself. I alluded to a couple of these, but looking at the students as we presented the past couple of years, grade 10 ELA students with disabilities, we were excited they had made a 30% gain in meeting and exceeding when we looked at the two, sort of the pre-pandemic and the first pandemic assessment. And now as we're moving beyond the pandemic, the group of students has made another 30% gain. I went in and accessed the report several times to make sure that it hadn't either timed out or I hadn't gotten there before they put the final data in. But that's a pretty significant success story for our students and our teachers working with them. We saw similar gains in math, so it was 70% meeting or exceeding in spring of 22. Not necessarily the same percentage of gain year over year across the grades, but a significant gain last year to this year. And 70% for the student grouping is a pretty remarkable achievement historically. We also were able to isolate some of the data and be able to talk about it publicly for our multilingual learners at grade 10, outpacing the state. Our multilingual learners who took the spring 2022 assessment, 67% of them were meeting or exceeding in ELA, 58% of them meeting or exceeding in math. And that's an aggregate look at the student grouping, because it doesn't differentiate for us in this data by proficiency level. That's something we can drill into, but it takes us beyond the numbers that we can publicly speak about. So I just wanted to give you the aggregate there for that grouping. And then across all testers in grades 3 through 8, there's just more success story for our students with disabilities, exceeding the state by 13% in math. So when we look at that group, and again, that's where the state tells us we're seeing the greatest recovery. But knowing that we achieved at a rate higher than the state tells you, I think, more about the level of recovery we're experiencing here in Falmouth. So speaking to our level of resilience and identifying with being a clipper. When it comes to instruction, we alluded a bit to the intervention program that we're using for literacy development in ELA in the earlier grades, trying to create that confidence as readers prior to the first assessment series, but really prior to their transition towards Morse Pond. We're also looking at our data practices, how we host data meetings, how we do progress monitoring as a result of the data meetings, and using a couple of different tools to track the data, one of which is our benchmark assessment system. We've upgraded that to use the progress monitoring tools that are in there and connect it directly to our curriculum and our resources. And we continue to use the information to inform instructional choices. We are in year 2 of a 2-year process, supported by the Department of Education in selecting high quality instructional materials from math. And what started off as looking at a math program for K-5 and then became a math program for K-6 has become a look at a comprehensive math program K-8, aligned with some of our broader goals about setting students up for success at the high school and really looking deep at the high school scope and sequence, the courses that are available to students as we look at who's accessing the highest levels of math and trying to make sure that we have more entry points into those courses. And continuing with our professional development and sharing of best practices, which we've shared with you a couple of times, that the teacher-led PD and the ability to share practices that we can take to scale has also informed our achievement and our growth as we have more and more people sharing those out and trying different ideas. So finally, in terms of broader points to share, the forward momentum, certainly using our digital tools, not as our curriculum or as our pure instructional model, but certainly in our interventions and in our stations and groupings. So students can access anything from guest speakers, which we had a group of math students last year who met with a researcher that was in Antarctica. They wanted to know more about penguins because Gigi from ST Math is a penguin, and so they took a deep dive into the research and they did some mathematical problems. The engagement in outdoor learning. So we have just working with the outdoor learning committee and the teachers who are part of that. We were able to deploy outdoor learning carts to all of the schools. So they have measurement tools in the carts. So they're able to use those while they're outside to make connections between math and science learning. And I've already mentioned to you the HQIM, the selection of the curriculum for math. And just continuing to socialize learning. So students are doing sense making, right? They're not just relying on or repeating the things that have been shared with them in instruction, but they're making new meaning and connections. So hopefully we can help them transfer it from one subject or one learning environment to another so they become lifelong skills. So thank you very much. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Sonia? Yes.
So, I'm always curious about how we fit into the Cape and Islands kind of overall with our trends, as far as neighbors who have more similar experiences to us than maybe more urban districts. So I know that's not easy to get that information. Do you analyze that when you go to your curriculum instruction?
So
meetings
at
and
the
things?
Cape Island Curriculum Directors meeting, we don't tend to do district by district comparisons there. That is because that's something that we have done historically. It is one of the lenses that I put on the data. We were just advised in our public presentations not to make that level of comparison while we're creating a baseline. So that each district is kind of focused in on their story and their recovery. But yes, that is a step I take.
So, and this aligns with kind of these other questions that are more like me just throwing things out there. It's not me asking you necessarily, but, I'm really curious about, we did this great push with bringing students in person, our youngest students in person in the 2020-21 school year,
Mhm.
right? And I'm really interested in looking at how that has impacted students. And I know, we look at our third graders and that they're not to the state average right now.
I wanted to refer to a slide and you're
Okay.
fine too. I just realized it wasn't there.
Okay.
Sorry.
But just in looking at that, and it was just one of those things that in my mind, that's not what I would have thought, because I think that we did amazing things for our youngest learners. So this aligns to another broad question around, is DESE, is the commissioner looking at some of these trends, and for districts that really have surpassed other districts in areas of looking at what have these years been like that have made it successful? Because we know a pandemic can hit, right? Crises can hit. So what are these things that we can ensure that we start doing or bringing in? And, I look at our amazing success, like I was looking at that 6th grade group, right? Like that's huge numbers of meeting and exceeding, right? But what is it that's happening in those pockets, and how do we capitalize on that? So,
That's the exact slide I was looking for.
okay,
So the 6th grade group, right, they had their, I say the interrupted year, like the year that everything closed and we had to move, was their 3rd grade year, right? So their first time taking any test was 4th grade, but they had to complete in-person 4th grade. Restricted in a variety of ways, but an in-person year. And then same thing when I look at the 5th graders who also sort of had that level of achievement above the state, they would have been 2nd graders the year that we had closed. So they took, 3rd grade, but they had 2, complete in-person years moving forward. And they also had a lot of the foundational skills prior to that interruption. So while I might not be able to go in and disaggregate the data by in-person or online learners, that to me speaks to the response we had to see that level of achievement above the state. But in none of the trainings, around how to regard the data, how to understand the data, have they approached the difference in the learners. That said, I think for us, some of the digital literacy, like getting at the last part of your question, like getting at the digital literacy skills and the flexibility, to be able to go offline, online, in some blend of tools, and looking at even how we're designing some of the rotations in classrooms for students to have some independent navigation time, is creating, that facility for them, that fluency to be able to move among them, which we hope serves them in learning in any environment, but would also certainly help versus the response we had in March of 20, when we're like, oh, okay, yeah, we're gonna figure this out. I think it would help us respond a lot quicker.
Yeah.
And not have to talk about recovery the same day.
and I hope the commissioner will do that too. I hope that there will be a focus at the state level of looking at, what do we capitalize and how do we support districts to get prepared for whatever is ahead? Because there will be something, I'm sure, at some point. We never would have thought we would have gone through this, right?
I think some of the funding they're putting towards how they're seeing and viewing high quality instructional materials is part of that, but they're still not talking about the context in which the student learned.
Yeah.
Great questions. Thank you, Leah. Any other questions? Margaret?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. There's sort of a concern that in education, we just focus on helping people learn how to answer questions, so that we are moving to approving their testing. And I think your presentation can alleviate any fears that that's what's not happening in the family school system.
Thank you, Margaret. Andrea?
So I have 2 questions. One, a little bit, I'll start with a more general one. When I'm listening to you comparing some of the data from previous years, but then I also hear that there's been so many switches to the test. And even like this year, you're saying we really shouldn't be doing comparisons because they want to create a new baseline. And so how much of that, I don't know, I kind of lose a little confidence in some of it, because in telling the story of what we're doing, or trying to shift what we're doing to follow the newest results we get. if there have been so many significant changes to how the test is or where they're setting their new state level median or, so how do you feel about it as you're digging into the data with all of those caveats?
I think the most important thing for us is to know that the instruction we're delivering, right, is of the highest quality we can provide, so that however our students are asked to demonstrate their learning, right, that they're able to. We would be remiss if we didn't introduce them to the format, right, given the level of attention, right, that MCAS gets. But it's not the only means by which we assess. And again, this is a snapshot, and they have a whole portfolio of forms of assessment. That's something through professional development we're working on. We also rely a lot on our longitudinal data through our benchmark assessments, which we just added some supportive assessments looking at grade 7, just in case there's cohorts of students we want to follow through, using that series. But at the end of the day, we have to trust that what our teachers are doing, and our teachers are amazing, is the absolute best for our students, and that, their learning will translate across any number of assessments.
Great. And then my specific question relates to the data you were showing on ELA, and somewhere along the explanation, you were saying that some of the area you're working on is related to how quickly some of that, can you explain that a little bit more, because yeah.
So we're looking at automaticity. It's the ability to just recall what sounds are or how words are constructed, so that students don't necessarily have to sit, and sound them out. They've got the recall ability, so it would speed up their words per minute, and it aids their comprehension. So right now they're breaking things down into some smaller parts, and really sort of relying on some of the discrete skills that, as they get more comfortable and build that fluency, it would just come more naturally for them.
Okay, so that's to increase their comprehension, not for just speed's sake, right?
Yeah,
Right, and we're not
Both
just
are
trying to make
certified.
them, yeah.
Great, thank you, Andrea. Kelly.
Thanks. So I have a quick question, and I'm not looking for an answer to it right now, but I'm wondering, we can see how our subgroups compare to subgroups across the state. Do we look at how they compare to ourselves? I see that we're outperforming the state in those subgroup areas, but I'm wondering how our kids in subgroups do compared to their peers. Do we look at that?
Yes, that's part of our data teams, and that's part of the reviews. It's actually one of the things that I'm not sure where to look to try and create eye contact with you. Which is one of the steps in particular. We start in our 7 through 12 departments. They start their department meetings at the beginning of the year. And then at Morse Pond, I know they're using their PLC time as well as any additional meeting time. And then they're using both their PLC and additional scheduled time for grades 3 and 4 to look at their data. So, they're looking at it at their school level with attention to all of their different student groupings as well as the aggregate.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Any other questions or comments?
Can I just ask a follow-up question? Because I know that they pull out like non-Ls and Ls for, do they do that for students with disabilities and non-students with disabilities? Okay.
So recognizing that there's limitations, right, to using any of the publicly available data when you get to smaller groupings. One of the things that we've done through the magic of Mike Falcone and his ability to understand spreadsheets, we've created a Google Data Studio. So every fall following the public release, we release to each individual teacher a data studio that allows them to make any number of comparisons to their students. So they can look at all of their students, they can look at a longer profile of an individual student, but they can also compare multilingual learners, students with disabilities, low-income students, so they can see those filters. And they get to see their current year students to make informed decisions for the students they have now. And they also get to see their previous years, 1 year removed, to see the results of the students they taught that year.
That's great, but there isn't like there's like the DART for English learners, which is
Yeah.
fabulous, but there isn't one for other learners.
Yeah, so
Okay.
we rely on the tools that we build. So we pull the master MCAS data file, and then we pull a file from Power School. And
So
we
you
match up that
create
data, so we, yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, Dr. Chillier, thank you as always, appreciate it. And we are going to circle back to the presentation on the equity audit. Dr. Dorr.
Thank you. So tonight we have a organization with us tonight, the M.A.S.S, Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium, to present. I'm going to turn it over to Henry.
Am I okay right here?
You're okay right there?
Okay.
Yes, you are okay there, because we'll have it.
Okay.
But if you'll just share with the school committee, Henry, a little bit about the process and how we came to this selection.
Absolutely. So the organization that we're using is Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium. It's I think they're M.A.S.S, that's what they deal with, and we'll have that up there. We're dealing also specifically with one of their sub-departments, which is the Center of Education Equity, CEE. We met a number of times with Dr. Darrell Williams, who went through the whole process with us. And now his associate is going to be there, is with us today, and it's Miss Penny Portello. She will be giving a bigger presentation. She's an educational equity specialist. So since July of 2022, I've gotten this task of choosing this equity, an equity consultant firm, and it's been a long journey where there was talks with many schools and people in my position, researching different types of equity firms. We cut it down to like 15 different firms that we took a deeper dive from that part there. Then we went from 15 to 7 to like, are they good to do an interview session? So we have multiple interview sessions with 15 different firms. And then we brought it down to 2. And we had a second Zoom interview, and finally today I'd like to say this is the one we picked. Ultimately, the references were really good, and Desi recommended them. We really like this firm because some of the firms that we had were check and done. Some schools will just kind of like, yep, we did an equity audit and that's it. Where this firm here really is going to be doing a deep dive with us. Not only are they going to do the audit and seeing the areas that we don't see, seeing where we have to get into, but also, you know, removing the barriers and allowing students to thrive. And that's what, you know, that's one of our biggest things, that we want excellence for all our students. I love that we have this data, the MCAS, because we were talking about these subgroups. Well, we want to really look and see what are the problems that they're not, why aren't they? And so this is going to really help us. In addition to that, I love the fact that then they go into planning and coaching and advising, instructing. So it's a multi-year process. It's going to be a deep dive. They have one of the departments has a grant from the Department of Education, where they are allowing us up to 3 years in doing multiple stages of deep diving. And because it's a grant, it comes to us for free. So that's exciting. So this really a deep approach. And I love their community aspect. You know, this education is more a community aspect there, and they're gonna be talking to different people, coming into our community, making sure they're there. And so this is the reason, ultimately a lot of reasons, but I think this is one of the reasons that we really chose this this corporation. So at this point, I would love to get Ms. Portello to give us a presentation. She's given me her PowerPoint, so I'm gonna try to do her PowerPoint, and she's been traveling, so I hope you can, she's very gracious to come in here. Hi, Jenny, how are we doing? There she is.
Hey, everyone, can you hear me?
Absolutely, we definitely
Awesome.
can.
I apologize in advance if you hear some music in the background. I'm at a Starbucks because I'm here in Maryland for a client meeting tomorrow with another school district I partner with. So I'm multitasking this evening. So if there's any issues with the sound, please do let me know.
Absolutely. So I'm going to share your screen that you gave me. I hope I'm doing this well. So Ryan, please let me know if I'm doing okay. So there it is. And should I
Slideshow? Yep.
show right there? Okay.
Perfect.
So you let me know when to move, but you can go.
Sure, we can go right into the next slide. Thank you so much for that introduction. So again, my name is Jenny Portillo. I'm a senior education equity specialist with the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium. It's a mouthful. We are M.A.S.S because we no longer serve just the Mid-Atlantic region. My supervisor or associate director, Dr. Darrell Williams, will be the project director for this equity audit. Unfortunately, he was unable to attend this evening, but I'm really excited to be able to meet with you all for this preliminary overview of the process. Next slide. I'm a former teacher myself. I was an elementary school educator for several years, and I've taught in Texas and New York. And most recently, my engagement with the Massachusetts area is in partnering with Cambridge Public Schools on a similar equity audit process. I also graduated from the Harvard Graduate School of Education in 2021. So Massachusetts is quickly becoming a second home for me, even though I'm a New Yorker and so diehard Yankees fan, but I'm sure you'll forgive me that. So for this brief session, I'm just going to be giving you a quick overview about the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium, and we'll talk about our equity tool overview and the implementation process for this audit. Next. Great. So we are an education equity nonprofit. Our focus is really on excellence and equity in education to achieve social justice. As Henry shared, we house several different projects. Among them is our Center for Education Equity, which I'll tell you a little bit more about in our next slide. So the Center for Education Equity is, again, one of the grants that we operate. We are one of 4 regional equity assistance centers that's funded by the Department of Education. We serve a region that spans from Maine down to Kentucky and also includes the territories of Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. We're able to provide assistance free of charge to schools under our grant, which comes from the Civil Rights Act and is a collaboration between the Department of Justice and the Department of Education. Next. So again, that's our serving region, and Massachusetts is a state that we've served for several years now under our Equity Assistance Center grant. Next. Okay, so now we're going to go into the actual equity audit tool and what an equity audit is. So an equity audit is a study of fairness of an institution's policies, programs, or practices. I shared the document ahead of time with Dr. Dora and with Henry so that they could share them with you. But we'd like to use this analogy of if the service we're providing is shoes, and we're thinking of equality as everyone gets a pair of shoes, everyone gets shoes that fits would be equity. The equity audit would be actually drilling down into who we mean by everyone, what do we mean by shoes, and then whether or not there are decision-making processes for how fit is identified and evaluated. And so it really digs deep into policies, practices, mindsets, et cetera, at the teacher and at the school level to help us determine different aspects of equity from an independent perspective of a third party, which would be us. And the equity audit is also conducted by internal members of your district, since they are the ones that are going to know their school context best. And the analysis is guided by us as the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium. Next. So within our equity audit tool, we've established 6 criteria for what we've determined makes an equitable school. And I've highlighted them there, but the most important things are that a school that is truly equitable has to have a mission that's committed to equitable access. It needs to have an environment that's inclusive. And we do highlight both the visual and physical environment in light of the COVID-19 pandemic and the fact that some schools are still leveraging virtual learning. So we want to ensure that both, whether it's a virtual or a physical environment, that it's inclusive for all students and communities, that the school reflects and works in collaboration with various groups across lines of difference, and that it works within the school community as well. We're also an equitable school. We also encourage to work in partnership with families and other existing community organizations. And this piece is really critical in providing ongoing, embedded, and systemic professional learning opportunities. While equity isn't something we can PD our way through, it is really critical that districts and schools are providing their staff and faculty with the right amount of professional learning to help them around cultural competence, bias, and other emerging equity issues. And then the final piece, which is really critical, is that an equitable school must promote social emotional well-being for students and families. This has always been critical, but especially in light of the COVID-19 pandemic and so many other social issues that have caused quite a great deal of unrest in schools across the country, we think that this is an especially critical piece that sometimes is divorced from equity, but we believe is actually an integral part of it. Next. And so in an effort to help schools reach that criteria for being an equitable school, we've designed the equity audit tool. And the tool is really designed to help educators develop more concrete understanding of what it means to practice equity. A lot of times equity is treated sort of as an abstract concept, but we've really drilled down into what does it mean to operationalize equity across different domains of operation for schools and districts. And it really is meant to help schools and school personnel reflect on whether or not the current school policies, procedures are equitable. And so there are 8 different domains that are covered within that. And really the idea is to determine whether or not there's a learning environment that's really supporting students, staff, families to all be successful. Next. For the purposes of your equity audit as a district, we'll be focusing, because we have 3 questionnaires. The first one we'll be focusing on is the criteria for an equitable school. There is a scale for rating each item within this particular questionnaire. As you can see, there's 101 questions. These are divided across 8 domains, which I'll be going over with you in just a moment. And the reason that we have a scale for rating is to acknowledge the fact that different schools and different faculty and staff members might be at different points in their equity journey. Next. So here you see a breakdown of the different areas that are covered by our equity audit tool and the number of items or questions that are associated with each domain. So we have school policy, assessing community needs, school organization administration, school climate, staff, assessment and placement, professional learning, and standards and curriculum development. One thing I want to note is that even though our equity audit tool already exists as something that districts can use, when you partner with us, we're able to customize the tool. So if your district only wants to zero in on certain domains, we can do that. It doesn't have to be that always all 8 are done. And then moreover, individual items can be customized. So if there are items that, for example, we have that might not be applicable to your district, those can be removed. We can also adjust language. Since you all have been embarking on equity work as a district, we can adjust language so that it's aligned to what you're already doing and doesn't require that folks learn new verbiage or new terminology. We can also add items that are not currently there that would help assess current practices or policies that you all have developed around equity as a district. Next. Next. Okay, so I'm going to quickly go over what the scale is. And so the way we've designed the scale for each item, as folks go through and do these ratings, they would decide if a particular item rates as latent, meaning that the particular district or school in question isn't currently doing anything or doesn't have a system in place that as it relates to a certain question. Emergent, which would mean that there are some systems in place, but maybe it's not explicit or formalized, or it's not strong. And so there's still it's still a work in progress at that point. Established would mean that there is an explicit system in place, not just one that's talked about, but actually exists on paper as well, and that it's implemented with a fair degree of consistency. And then advanced would mean that it's beyond just established, and rather this is something that is a process or a norm that's centralized and allows for continuing revision, particularly from diverse stakeholders across the district system. Next. All right. So when we're rolling out an equity audit, first of all, what we encourage is that every school that will be conducting the audit establish a school-based equity team. The number of team members can really vary. There's no set number. But what we really do encourage is that there's the diversity of representation. And what we mean by that is a number of things. That means that you have a diversity in terms of race, gender, religion, language, et cetera, as applies to your particular school community to make sure that you have representative perspectives. But it also means that you have administrators, teachers, students, especially at a high school level, if they're able to engage that way, caregivers, folks that are a part of community organizations that might partner with the school, because that way you're getting a degree of different perspectives. Whereas if you only had a school leadership team, for example, complete the audit, their perspective might be limited by their positionality, where they don't see potential gaps in the process, or they're not privy to potential limitations of a process as well. So it's really important that this equity team doesn't just exist for the purpose of conducting the audit. Rather, this is a team that's going to be doing the ongoing work of doing the audit and action planning and implementing together and continuously coming together to reflect and represent the voices of the school. Next. And so what we push schools to do is once they've recruited their school equity team members, is that they actually have meetings before the rollout of the audit where they can determine their team processes. This would mean things like rolling out what agendas will look like, norms, roles, how often they'll meet, what kinds of consensus processes they'll have. And we provide some training on this at the start, but we also understand that through the work you all are doing, you might have best practices already around having school-based equity teams that you want to encourage. And so we would work with you to ensure that we're aligned to whatever work you've already been doing. We also include recommendations around having roles for those school equity teams so that there is there's an emphasis on equity of voice. Even if you have an equity team, it's really possible that power dynamics might exist where if I'm a family member or a caregiver or a student and I'm in a room with educators and administrators, I might not feel compelled to share. And so that's why we provide the training on considerations for making sure that there is a level power dynamic that allows for true elevation of voice of the diverse stakeholders on the team. And then we also provide, again, as part of that, possible norms that we provide in our trainings are norms around courageous conversations about race, providing norms around expecting and experiencing discomfort, speaking your truth, etc. Next. So this is an example of who a school equity team could include: family liaisons, community partners, school leaders, etc. This is not an exhaustive list. If there are other folks within a school that should whose voice should be represented in the audit, then they should be invited to be a part of that team. And we would work with the school-based equity teams to determine what their recruitment process could look like. They would own that process, but we can help support them with that. Next. Once the team is established and they've been able to have their initial meetings and are ready to roll out the process, they would go through a training with us. And then this is what the implementation would actually look like. First, members of each school equity team individually go through the ratings and rate on that 4-point scale each item across all the domains that you all as a district choose to move forward with. After that, those ratings are submitted through a digital platform called Qualtrics, which is basically like a form. And what it does for us on our end is it generates the data so that we're able to do an analysis around means, averages, the standard deviations, etc. Then what happens is that folks will get a PDF copy of their ratings that they should hold onto. And there's a consensus process that is scheduled with each school-based equity team. They can do it across several sittings. It doesn't just have to be one. We've noticed that on average, folks who decide to do it all in one sitting take about 3 to 4 hours because it invites a lot of discussion and conversation. So many school equity teams opt to do the consensus portion of the audit across several sessions. Again, that schools have the autonomy to decide that, and we'll provide guidance as to what might work best for them. When the team comes together for the collaborative consensus process, the idea is that each person is going to elevate the ratings that they gave and have a conversation around the why, especially when there is a large span of ratings where potentially administrators gave a potentially high rating, but other stakeholders did not. And that in and of itself starts to facilitate a conversation around potential inequities that are existing within the school that others might not have been aware of up until that point. Once that consensus process is done, one set of ratings will get submitted for each school, and that will also go in a Qualtrics form. The reason that we ask for a collection of both the individual and the consensus data is because in our analysis, it helps us determine whether or not perhaps there was a swaying of scores that happened either higher or lower once the team came together. Often what we notice is that individual scores will be lower than the consensus because sometimes those different perspectives will come into play. So we'll note that in our analysis, and it will also should pose questions around what happened in that conversation that caused so many members to then shift their ratings higher or lower than they did when they individually rated. There will also be a space on the Qualtrics forms for teams to capture notes on their process, because that's going to be important qualitative data for them to have as well as to how they move forward as a team. Next. This is a sample timeline. As I was explaining when I first met with Dr. Doerr and Henry, was that the timeline really depends on the other things happening within the school system. So when we've conducted this audit we just completed a large audit of over 200 schools for the Montgomery County Public School System in Maryland. That was initially going to take much less time than it ended up taking, because the district asked for more customizations. Schools had assessments or other dates they couldn't work around to meet as teams, so that extended the timeline. So it's really variable. But this is a sample timeline of what it could take depending on how quickly we're able to turn around your feedback on how you'd like to customize, and really how much time the school teams have to actually work together on the consensus process. The individual ratings portion of it tends to go fairly quickly, since it's something that folks do on their own time. So for about 2 months, we would focus on doing trainings. We encourage and we do offer caregiver training, so that because we want them to be a part of those school-based equity teams, they also need the capacity building around what the audit tool is, how to use it, so that they feel competent to engage in the process along with school staff and administration. And then they would recruit during that time if they haven't yet already. Then teams would spend approximately about 2 months doing their individual and consensus processes, again, allowing for a buffer because we understand that there are other meetings and obligations school teams may have. Then we would get, M.A.S.S would get the preliminary findings, and we would start to generate, you'll receive interim data updates from us. So it won't just be that you have to wait until the end to find out what's going on. And equity teams will meet and review and discuss findings. Then we would support you in the creation of individual school equity action plans, as well as district-wide trends that need to be addressed through recommendations as well. And then following that data collection and analysis and recommendations, we would support in the monitoring of those equity plans and recalibration and updating moving forward from there. Yep. And so the contact information for myself and for Dr. Williams is posted there, but that is the very quick crash course on what the equity audit is, the M.A.S.S equity audit tool, and again, a very abridged version of what the process would look like. What I really want to stamp is that, as Henry said, we're very much about co-constructing processes. We don't have one set way of doing things, because we understand that equity work and really any school improvement work is so contextualized. And so we really do every meeting, every sort of presentation, we work with you as a district to make sure that it's addressing your needs and the things that you're hearing and seeing from schools. Even in this presentation, before I created it, I met with Henry and Dr. Doer and asked, what is it that you want me to cover? And that's sort of how we operate in our trainings as well. What are the gaps that you're seeing where we can support both short-term and long-term capacity building? And the reason is because we're big believers in not just coming in, doing the work and leaving. We want to build that internal capacity as a district, because at the end of the day, you all will be the carriers of this work and this message. And so that's really what our emphasis is on, how we can best support you to take real ownership of the work.
So much, Jenny. Questions on this beginning stages of the audit? Yes.
Leah. So my question is just kind of before Jenny, like the process of how we got here, and now understanding that this was a grant from, are we just doing questions with Jenny right now? Or is that?
I think we can open it up. I don't know how much time Jenny has, but.
Are you okay, Jenny, with the time?
Yeah.
So kind of walking us through how we got to Jenny's presentation, and then understanding a little bit about, because we had talked about different costs of equity audits. It looks like this is a grant, kind of understanding how this has come about.
So it came about, a long time of research. I'm not sure what exactly so we sat down with our central office team, and we just discussed the pluses and minuses of each firm that we looked at, and we researched, and we said which one is the best for our community. And we felt like this one, after even a second interview, felt like this one would be the best. And I don't think it's just a grant, but the grant did come to play. But I think a lot of these firms were, I don't know, I think they appealed to us. I think that this group here appealed to us in a better light. And I love that Desi approved. That was one of the things. So I was looking at one of the things I was looking at Desi website and said, oh, this is one of the stuff. And as well as I went to other schools, find out where they use, And I saw a couple of them which were, yep, there are definitely people using them, but then I didn't see any follow through. So I'm like, oh, is this gonna be a deep dive, or is this gonna be just something that's a quick and we're done? Where this seems like they're following through multiple, so I like that. I like that, like when I was with Dr. Williams, he's going, well, we have a stage 1, we'll deal with this aspect. Stage 2, we'll now next year, we're gonna deal with this problem. Stage 3, so like multiple years of let's really hit home on all these aspects. And I like that. I like that we're gonna just not just lip service, but we're gonna attack those
So
problems.
just to clarify a little bit, I'm wondering like, who was the team? Like, who did you guys work with? Was it just central admin? Did you have any parents? What was the group that, what kind of stakeholders were involved in this process?
It was other DEI members. It was that I had talked to, but definitely the ones who made the decision was the central office.
So it was the central office team?
Yep.
Any other questions? Yeah. Before we move on to
No.
I'll circle back.
Okay.
We have Andrea.
So I have like sort of two groups of questions too,
Yes.
right? One more about the process, I think kind of like what Leo was getting at, and then maybe some more specifics. But I guess maybe along the lines of choosing this methodology, essentially, was there anything different about what we just heard in this presentation from other organizations and how they approach an equity audit?
I think I'll definitely need some help on this one.
So there were, for instance, one organization that we interviewed had a set questions and there was no variation. So these are the questions, this is what we'll go through, and here's your response. So, and then they're done. They do not present in front of school committee, they don't present in front of stakeholders. And that didn't feel like a right fit for us, right? That's one example that was very different. As Henry said, there were a couple that they come in, they do the audit. There's no follow-up, they don't offer that next steps. This felt like very much like a partnership, and being able to customize, to be able to take that journey together, but then that they would be around to help implement, help us make decisions, help implement. One of the things that I had said to Dr. Williams, like, we may come back with 5 or 6 things that we need to focus on. And we may not have the capacity to start working on 5 or 6 things. And one of the things I liked as a response was, we'll figure out what the capacity is, what the priorities are, and we'll begin the work, but then we'll circle back to, and we'll continue. And if any point we want to break down the equity audit, we could do that in segments as well, so that we can begin the work, look at the so it's very customizable about what would work for us. And I think we didn't necessarily get that from any other group. So I felt like once we start with the stakeholder group, there's going to be a lot of input about what this looks like, and that felt right.
Because, and maybe, just trying to think, I don't have a lot of experience looking at how other equity audits are done, but sometimes you get a presentation here or there. And it seems like sometimes organizations will come in and they'll go through all the pieces and compile sort of the report. And this sounds like a very different process than what I'm used to hearing about in terms of establishing our teams who are sort of looking at what we're doing internally as opposed to maybe externally. And was there a reason to make that choice over another?
Very much building capacity, internal capacity, to be able to, as Dr. Williams said when we first interviewed, is that the reliance shouldn't be on the external. It should be building capacity so that we can continue this work for years. But having a 3-year partner, certainly in helping us to build that, but starting that equity team from the very beginning, which was actually another connection that Henry had already started. So even before we had interviewed any of the organizations, Henry was already thinking, he can't do this work alone. So he was already beginning the conversations at each school about building equity audits at every school to build capacity and move on. And so the fact that that's where they start, that this particular organization starts with an equity team at every building, then, you know, kind of builds on the vision that we were already starting.
Okay, and this is for Ms. Portillo. So how many schools are you working with through this grant, I guess?
So we work with any and every school that solicits us across that 15 state and territory region. So for example, we serve a great number of districts, particularly where we started in that Mid-Atlantic region, because that's where we have partnerships. But we also are working with a collection of schools in the Maine area. In Portland, we've had a Southern Maine partnership and working with the University of Southern Maine and several districts in that area. We've worked with Danbury Public Schools in Connecticut. In New York City, we have partnerships with the New York State Department of Education, New York City DOE, as well as OU BOCES in Orange Ulster County. I mean, I could keep going. We have so many partnerships. I myself alone am working with about 4 different districts right now on various equity audit related processes. For example, one of the tools that I've been developing as a supplement to our equity audit tool is a curriculum audit tool that focuses on culturally responsive and sustaining pedagogy and content. We have elements of that within our standards and curriculum development domain of the equity audit, but we wanted to build on it because there are districts that want to take a deeper dive even than just an initial evaluation. And so the work really spans. We also help with recruitment, with workforce diversity, recruitment, retention, and hiring. So there's a number of things that we offer. And so we work with several districts across the country.
Wow, that's amazing. That's a lot.
It's a lot. We stay busy for all the good and the bad of it. In an ideal world, I wouldn't have to have this job, right? Because the system would just work as it should for all students. But until that day comes, you know, we definitely do engage in quite a lot of work with districts at various levels in terms of how ripe is the context for really transformative equity work versus in context where we're just ready for small incremental changes to help make things better day to day for kids and families.
Great. And then about the process that you were outlining in your presentation. So these school-based equity teams, are they the only ones that get the questionnaires that I saw on one of the slides?
For this particular process, yes. Another way that they could be done is you could administer it as a survey to more participants. But the only problem with that is that then you eliminate a lot of the conversation that would happen around the consensus process. And instead we would rely on averages to determine an overall rating for the school for each item within the domain. We often invite the consensus process instead because it creates like that initial conversation around gaps existing within the school. But that's something that we can also talk about if there's a preference for administering it as a larger survey, but then again, knowing that the analysis is going to be primarily based on averages rather than a conversation.
So then that sounds like the selection of membership on those teams is critical. Is that something that you help with?
Yes. Yes. And so even though the recruitment is owned by the schools themselves, and often there is a school leader or administrator who is the point person, we really advocate for that person though not to be the leader of the team because again, we want to avoid that imbalanced power dynamic. But they often have to own the communication around recruitment. So we do offer guidelines around what that recruitment process could look like. But again, you all ultimately have the ownership and the autonomy to decide how that goes. We provide the guidance and the training and best practices. But again, we want more of that ownership to come from you all since it's your school community that you're working with.
Okay, thank you. And I have a few questions as well.
Sure.
First, M.A.S.S, how many other people are on staff?
We're a staff of about 33 right now. Yep. We, just so you all know, we've been around for we're celebrating our 30th anniversary this year. And so we went from a really a mom and pop shop sort of organization with only about 8 staff members to now being a staff that is over 30 and in 30 years. So we've definitely grown in that time.
Wonderful. And on average, how often do you connect with each individual district throughout this process?
As often as you all want us to. So we offer 3 tiers of service, which we call our intensive, our targeted, and our universal services under our grant. You all would be what we call an intensive project. So we can have conversations with clients that have been intensive that are weekly, bi-weekly, monthly. It really is designed depending on what the needs are. And those meetings can range from coaching sessions to training workshops to conversations, planning meetings, etc. So again, highly customizable based on your needs.
Wonderful. And the next question is sort of for our district, and Andrea touched upon it, the fact that a key piece of the equity tool is self-reflection. So what are we going to do, or what will our internal recruiting look like for the equity team?
For the equity team. So what we've done right now is we've talked about it with the principals and said the need for it. I've been going to each school and having individual conversations. Schools have actually come together and talked about coordinating their teams together, like the Morris Pond, Lawrence, and the high school have all got together last Friday and saying, what can we do to develop that equity team together? I know that the elementary schools are doing individual equity team, but then they're gonna have a committee that represents the entire elementary, so they wanna make sure that they're, and they see that this team is not just for this process, but this team is going to continue beyond this process and do the work of equity throughout the whole process. I do want to add something that, you know, the process here. Every time we met with a team, I was making a spreadsheet comparison, and we had some guidelines, and we were talking about, you know, how many times they meet, what are some key concepts, what were some of their tendencies. And every time we talked about it and we looked at pros and cons. And so by the time we're done, if you look at my grid, I don't have it here, we have like, okay, this group is off, this group, and until the last 2 is like you know, the last 2 men standing and 2 persons standing. So then it was, okay, let's find out, let's dig deep. So there were a lot of criteria that we really wanted to check out. Price was one, but there were some miscellaneous aspects on each one. So we really wanted to, it wasn't just like, here it is, but we really wrestled every time we had an interview. At the end, we're like, okay, what do you think? And so that was a nice process to hear everyone's voice on each one. So I hope you understand that was it was a really good process. It took a couple months to do. So I think.
Something that we could see. Oh, sorry, Margaret.
I'm sorry.
Can you say yes?
Can I interrupt for a second?
Yes.
I'm sorry, it was on the chat. She has to log out. I don't know.
Yeah, and I was trying to reply and listen, and yeah, so if you could, Jenny, if you could just stay on for a few more minutes on your phone, completely understand, in case there are any additional
No problem.
questions.
No problem. I'm going to switch over right now. So if you lose me on one screen, I should be on the next one.
Okay.
Well, I want to know, I think fairness is really important. I think we all have our own vision of fairness, and that can be complicated. So how involved are you in terms of the equity of the teams? And one, and number 2, how involved are you when a school district decides that they need to focus on this and not that, in terms of looking at it in terms of fairness? Are you concerned? Does this make any sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you involved in making sure that the real process is equitable in terms of the team, in terms of things that are omitted or things that are added, or things that are used in depth?
I don't think she hears this.
Did you hear me at all?
Jenny, were you able to hear that?
I think she may be transitioning. Yeah. She's not able to listen in because she's having to change areas where she is right now.
Well, I do have a question for you.
Yes, let's do that. You're muted.
Okay.
She's muted. Oh, she's out.
Oh, she's
So
out.
if you could ask Margaret, if you could ask the question for
There
Henry.
many said, I want to know how involved you are in terms of the selection of the equity teams.
She's not, she's not there.
Oh, we
You
can
want to ask
talk.
the question for Henry?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, question. When you talk about, you know, the schools getting together, you're talking about the principals, or you're talking about other constituents?
We're talking about the principals.
Okay,
So the principals, I assume right now, I say to principals, you're the equity leader of your school. I'm your partner, I come alongside you, and we're gonna go there. And we've had these conversations. Who do you want? And they're talking about what am I looking for, what the kind of aspect, but we're looking for a diverse look. We're also looking for people that can actually talk to others as well, because I'm looking for long-term where this team might be one that will be leaders of the school and saying, okay, how can we help you to other teachers? So that's gonna be a long-term aspect on that. The aspect of like, what if they say there's six major problems? I like it that we're not gonna hit every single one the first year, but I like it that we can have a discussion of, okay, where with the equity, so what do you think we should hit first? And let's take it for year one, and year two, let's take the other ones, and year three, let's take that. So it's gonna be a discussion on where where's our biggest harm that we wanna take and deal with that. Does that answer some of your questions?
Well, the answer is that I'm not sure.
This one as well.
I'm not sure it feels comfortable.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, in terms of, number one, the principal is the equity leader.
Yes. But that's with, I assume that we hire principals, they're the leader of the school, and we expect them to. And that means I come alongside and I say, okay, let's have a discussion. And we've been having for 3 years, really, these conversations of what does it mean to be an equitable school? So they are.
It's not that I don't trust them, I think that they're very good principals, so I want to be clear about that. I've met most of them and I've been very impressed. But I just think that how people get involved in the teams and the selection of those teams and who leads those teams, I think is really an important question, particularly if I get this right.
Yeah.
The assessment is going to be done by these folks and not a larger group of people. That's my concern.
But the teams will have stakeholders, right?
I can jump in. Sorry about that. I was I could. Sorry about that. I'm taking you all on the road with me because the coffee shop is closing. So I did hear the question, but I couldn't unmute because I wasn't a panelist. So just to be clear, so we're involved in providing best practices and making sure that we're training the school leaders on those important aspects of representation on school equity teams. They lead the recruitment. However, what they do not necessarily become the de facto leader of the school equity team. What we advocate for is a shared leadership approach, because if the school principal is the leader of the equity team, what we find is that everyone else sort of defers to what their take is and their perspective is. So that's why we really advocate for, again, that diversity of representation, not just of stakeholder, but also race, ethnicity, language, sexual orientation, if that's something that folks feel compelled to share, et cetera, so that you have a representation of who is actually in your school. And so we support, again, in providing all those best practices, but again, the ownership of the actual recruitment and the conducting and facilitating of meetings comes down to the schools, the school leaders, and the participants in that equity team. I hope that answers the question.
You have some kind of, I mean, you may sort of look at it and ask some questions, you may be involved in some way. Yes.
Yeah, so we will provide the training sessions and workshops, and we'll also provide coaching that comes with that, again, as long as meetings are convened for us to have all of those things. And so we provide the facilitation in that. And so it really, what the partnership between us and the individual school teams looks like is something that we would work out together to make sure that it's something that's going to work with folks' schedules, and that we're able to provide the training and workshops on the topics that are needed to make sure that people are aware of these different equity considerations when it comes to rolling out the school-based equity teams.
And when it comes to issues that people, can I continue?
Yes.
When it comes to issues that people may decide they don't need that or they need this, are you involved in that sort of discussion about why certain things are brought in and certain things are left out, and how that may affect equity?
Yes. And so to give you an example, with one of the districts that I'm working with right now, when they were deciding which portions of the audit they wanted to do, because they knew it was not within their current capacity to do the full 8 domains, what we had them consider is, for example, when you're choosing your domains, what is the different equity work that your district has embarked upon? How do we build on that? Because we don't want to create redundancy. We want to build off of existing efforts, right? And when they opted, they said, well, could we do only certain questions out of each domain. And we explained that that would give you a really limited purview of a particular domain. And so that we said, instead, we can do it staged. You do 4 areas first. We can do another 4 areas the following year of our partnership if you so choose. And we do push back. We are partners and partners push back. And so when there are issues we're seeing around equity, we will raise those issues because again, we're there to build that internal capacity. So we don't take the strong-armed approach of making you do anything because ultimately that's not our role. But as a true partner, we do give that feedback around where we have concerns that facilitation, for example, might not be equitable, teams might not be representative enough. So you'll definitely get that.
Okay, thank you. You know, those are my concerns. I think this is a good choice, and I sort of like some of the things I've heard, but those are my concerns.
Oh, good. Excellent.
Very important questions. Thank you for raising that.
Terry, I feel bombed with information in a short period of time.
It's a lot.
And it's a monumentally first time big step. And there was just so much information and such fast talking. And I just kind of am like in the same ballpark as Margaret about the stakeholders being involved. It's like we're thinking of them last, not first. That's just the way the process looks. So anyway, I mean, things have been ironed out, but I'll say to you, I had a hard time following all of this. So anyway, that's my comment.
Andrea. Yeah, I had one more question that came to mind when you talked about the fact that it's been around for 30 years, the organization. And I guess I was wondering, are there some schools or districts that you can point to as big success stories that you've worked with who have gone through this process that we could just kind of look at what some of these other districts have done?
Yeah, definitely. So one big example, and our system audit report is available on their website. With Montgomery County Public Schools in Maryland, we just finished a 2-year system-wide audit for them. Generated a report of just about 200 pages, and we're working with them on the follow-up with implementation and such. That's actually part of what I'm doing here in Maryland today and tomorrow. And so that's one district that is already embarking upon their journey for implementation. We also have Caroline County Public Schools, who we've worked with, that actually has a partnership that we had over several years that has also made significant changes in their policies, particularly around discipline and disproportionality. We have partnerships that started through Department of Justice and Office of Civil Rights Complaints as well. That's another way that folks have ended up working with us. For that, I won't get into more information because it's redacted, but this particular district is in Vermont. We were able to, what started as a requirement for them to work with us grew into a multi-year partnership where we were able to help them set up professional learning communities, communities of practice, and able to help them in their processes around disaggregating their data, both for academics and for discipline.
Thank you. Yes. And Jenny, it actually has nothing to do with your presentation. I really appreciate taking the time and telling us all about it. But I think I just want to kind of go to what Terry was talking about. I feel that as a school committee member, this is the first time I'm hearing about this. And I'm just going to express my concern around that I would have liked to be part of this process from the beginning. So when we got to this point and we had this great presentation from Jenny, I felt I knew what was going on and what the pulse of this was. So I think, I don't know if Terry, that's where you were coming from, but that's how I feel about this, that it's a lot of information. I have no context or concepts of what the other equity audit firms were. And this is coming to us as this was decided. And, I understand that there's not a budget piece to this, but there easily could have been. And I think it's really important for school committee to be part of this process from the beginning, along with other stakeholders.
I will say, if it's okay, that one of the things that Dr. Williams said to us is that he's coming in. He wants to see the community. He wants to talk to people in the community. So he'll be here with maybe with Jenny. I hope that they'll be coming and visiting and just understand the community. I do know that there is he does take community stakeholders as an aspect, and that was one of the reasons why we want it there, but you're talking about the process, should we have been in there and showing you that? So, yep.
Prior to now.
Kelly, I see you waving and your hand is up.
I know it's hard when you're not in the room though, so I'm trying to make it easier. I'm not complaining. I'm just trying to make it easier.
Hi, Kelly.
So I hear the comments about from Terry and from Leah, and it was a lot of information. It was even more so for me because I don't have a hard copy in front of me. But I did think it was interesting and certainly valuable, and I really appreciate Jenny taking the time to be here. But I just wanted to say that, Dr. Dorr has been updating us every meeting about where we are in the equity process. And, it would have been great to be more involved from the start, but I also acknowledge that she's been updating us about this, and I had many opportunities to ask more questions earlier on. And so, I think if anybody wanted to be more part of the process, we probably should have done that prior to now, because we had ample opportunity to do so.
While we said that, Mike, your hand is up.
Yes, thank you so much. I just had, I think I'm on the same line as Terry and Leah here, but how many equity audit firms came in, and can I get a rough idea of what the difference of pricing is? Not saying whose name, but is there a big difference in pricing? And then the grant, what does that cover? Like a one-time grant? Is that a multi-year grant? Because I keep hearing multi-year, things and only being presented with one choice and not knowing what the other ones are. That's something that is a concern of mine as well.
Thank you, Mike. So after there were, as Henry said, there were 15, 16 different groups that he started with. It came down to 7 groups. The cost was anywhere from beginning price of $150,000, and then every customized piece would have been an additional cost. To when we came down to the 2 groups, the 2 finalists, it was $110,000, and then this grant. I will say that it is very appealing that we get to be a partner and a part of this grant. But even before they were awarded the federal grant, they were still our top pick along the way, which then could have cost us. That they are for profit as well as this grant opportunity. So they were still the top of our pick, and we wouldn't have, and I don't know, we never really asked, because in the middle of this process, they were awarded the grant, and then did say they would accept us in. So I will say, I mean, that was the top range. There were various reasons, as I explained. One of the reasons why we didn't go with someone was because it was very prescriptive and there was no opportunity for us to customize, to have stakeholder input about the questions we would be asking, about involvement. It was very much outside of including us. So that's one very high cost to the one. Another one, there were a few other reasons along the way, that I don't need to get into here. So I'm not saying that this is the only one that would have provided, what we feel like it would be a high quality equity audit. We felt like this one was the best fit as we were moving through for a variety of reasons.
Do you have a second question, Mike, or is that your only question?
No, I think that was it. Oh, I do have one more question about the research. Because there are minors involved, how will whatever we decide to do, any kind of thing like this, how does the school committee and the superintendent plan on reaching out to the parents, the stakeholders of the minor children to make sure that all the parents are okay with the children being included? Is that a form or an announcement, something like that?
There will be involvement. Is Jenny still on? Is there a specific, that we just lose her?
Yes, I'm here. I'm here. I wanted real quick, very quickly to address the question that was previously asked about what the work includes. I mean, that includes, again, sort of, I don't want to say unlimited, obviously within reason, but it includes a number of meetings. There is no like limitation to it. Again, it can be weekly, monthly, however the school needs it. And then the other piece of it is it includes trainings, workshops, facilitations, and also the generation of final reports, analysis, action planning, et cetera. So it includes quite a number of things within that span. As for the grant, so we, again, are under the Equity Assistance Center grant, which is a 5-year grant. We first won our larger Equity Assistance Center grant in 2016, and we held that up until this point, and we were just renewed at the end of September for another 5 years. That we've been holders of this grant now for several years, and so we're excited to continue to be able to serve Massachusetts along with the rest of our area. As for the way that we operate with data sharing and documents, we would create a memorandum of understanding that we would have, we need to have sign off on around any data sharing or identifiable information that comes across. And as far as involvement, the high school level at most, where an equity team might want to have a couple of students as part of the equity audit team. And that, again, is to get different student voice and involvement. It's not a requirement. It's just something that we've noticed that especially schools that serve older students want to have their voices and making sure that they're getting that perspective. But we would, again, have all of these processes in place ahead of time. If a student decides to be involved or is recruited to be involved, there are consent forms that would also have to be signed to ensure that their parent or caregiver is informed and allows for them to participate.
Mike.
Just a quick follow-up if I could, for the recruitment process, at that point, would you inform parents of the recruitment process or after the recruitment process has already occurred?
Well, the whole school community would need to be informed that the recruitment process is even happening from the start, again, to elicit participation, because it shouldn't be something that's happening by invitation. It should be that folks who want to be involved, and then there can be a process for determining who gets elected out of anyone who's interested, to ensure that, because if the team becomes too large, it's going to be difficult to facilitate the process of actually conducting the consensus. But that, like, the schools would need to be informed before the recruitment period actually begins, so that people are aware that this is happening. And central office would need to own that communication as well, because it needs to be something that feels consistent between central office and each school that's conducting the process.
And then I have one last question, if I could. Jenny, does it make any sense to completely eliminate central office and principals from these groups so as to the respondents are more open with their answers? Because I've noticed that in some cases, like you've mentioned, when you have someone who is perceived as an authority figure, people hold back, or they give the lead back to the person, even if they are not the equitable leader in this case. So is that something that you have tried, or any opinion on that?
It's something that would be up to the district, frankly. We're not opposed to that, but one thing I will say is that a consideration to make before eliminating them out of the process would be that there is a specific section that applies to administration and policy, and the folks that usually have the most perspective on that are the school leaders. And in hopes of reducing that power dynamic where a school leader might get an unfair advantage, that's why we advocate for having a procedure to have someone else leading meetings and being the point of contact. The school leader is just the initial person that is spoken to, though, because they usually have the easiest time disseminating information out to the school community. So again, we're not opposed to it, but it presents other challenges if school leaders are not involved, because there are going to be portions of the equity audit that they have a certain perspective on that others don't. And so again, for equity of voice, we do want to make sure that their voices are heard as pertains to things like administration and policy as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so any other questions for Jenny? Because I'd like to let her move on with her evening. Seeing none, Jenny, thank you so much for joining us this evening and sharing some information about the equity audit. We appreciate it.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you all so much for your time, and we're excited to embark on this partnership with you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Jenny, appreciate it.
And any other questions for our internal team related to the equity audit? Okay, moving forward. Okay, next up is presentation budget overview.
All right, so some of this may be a repeat of some of the portions that we have discussed previously. Also, some of you will notice is the presentation that I sent to you that I presented to the Finance Committee, and I sent that person. So you'll see some of that information here. This is really to set the stage. This is talking about FY23. This is not getting into the next school year. That will come as part of our budget process. But just to talk a little bit about our needs and how we're addressing. So to talk about the student demographics and trends. This is our economic disadvantaged year trend look from FY10. So we did talk about this a little bit about that we've had an increase over just in the last 4 years, an increase of 391 students that fell into the economic disadvantaged group over the last 4 years. So just, I guess, trying to explain our need has increased. We in FY16, if you look at the number of the 24.8, that was a formula before the change to, it was at the 133% formula of the poverty level, and now we are at the 185%. So just to put it in perspective, if in FY16 it would have been the same, we would have been at the 34.8. So there is a huge jump, even you know, with a 10-point jump, but not quite as much as the 24 to the 43. I just wanted, because of the formula, the change, and I just wanted to make sure that we understood that. We have in the high needs area, and I want to mention this. I don't have a slide on this, but the change from FY20, which was 41.7%, to FY22 is 51.2%. So even in that calculation, we had jumped 10 percentage points. Last year, we talked about our kindergarten students that entered school. We had 250 kindergarten students. We had 129 of those students that were considered high needs. So over 50% of our kindergarten students entering. And of those 250 students, 114 were economically disadvantaged. So our demographics, they're definitely changing over time. The next group is the multilingual students. And we have, you can see the changes again, going back to FY10, we had 1.2% of our population. We are at 5.8% in this school year. In the last 4 years, we have increased our students by 52 students that qualify for our ELD program, our English Learner Development Program. Most of the students are arriving at a lower proficiency level, and we're also seeing additional concerns such as trauma and social emotional challenges, in addition that compounds the language barrier. In FY22, so last school year, 8.3% of our student population, the English was not their first language. So we have students, although not all 8.3 qualified for the ELD program, just to also show that there's another data point to show that our population, again, is changing. These are our students with disabilities. As you can see, in FY23, we're at an all-time high. From FY10 through FY20, we've had, you know, pretty much at the 17–18% percentile, but you can see as FY21 at 19.1. At FY 22, 20.1, and then at FY 23, we have 22.2. Again, our students are changing. In the past 4 years, we've increased 111 students that qualify for special education services. If you have questions about that, I can answer that, or I'll move on to kind of what our staffing response has been.
I just, I'm sorry, I just have a question. In terms of the increase in terms of student needs, are some of these from school choice?
Of the student needs, certainly could be, yes. So we've been increasing our reading support. And you can see that in FY 20, we had 12 reading specialists. We have 14 now. I also, we have added in the 1920 school year, our literacy manager, our early learning coach, mainly working with pre-K, K, and 1. We added in 2021, and although the early learning coach works with in all subject areas, really have been focusing on the early literacy. And although I'm talking about reading support, I did want to add that we've added math coaches for support as well to address the needs in math. So you can see that we now have 3 math coaches, 2 at the element pre-K through 4, and then 1 at the 5-6. Our number of ELD teachers have increased. In FY 20, we had 6. We are at 8 ELD teachers at this time. Just a point in time that I looked up in FY 13, we had 3 ELD teachers. Our special education support for this school year, we have 54 special education teachers, 60 teaching assistants, and 21 one-to-one aides. The 21 is quite high. We have not seen that before. The 60 teaching assistants, we do have additional teaching assistants. These are the 60 teaching assistants that help out with the special education students that help deliver this special education services through the IEP. Support on the number of counselors. In FY 20, we had 19. We are at 23. To break that down, our school adjustment counselors, we have 18.6 school adjustment counselors specifically, and we have added 1 gap counselor at the high school. We started with that grant last year with a counselor that was helping with students needing credit in order to graduate. And so we have continued and we've added that. That was very valuable last year and helpful to work directly with those students and their families and the liaison between the students and the teachers to help those students. We have grown from just the school adjustment counselors in FY 20 from 14 to in 23, 18.6. Just a little bit, or as a reminder about our budget. Our local budget, including our Chapter 70 that was approved in April, is at $52,950,000. We have the grants that total a little over 1.6 million. Circuit breaker, which is all special education, is 757,903. I do want to say within the grants, there are special education grants within the that overarching number. Some of that is special education as well. School choice within the FY 23 budget is a little over 1 million. And then our pending SOA dollars that will be voted on at town meeting in November, the town and then the finance committee just unanimously voted to support $1,475,000, and that's what will be asked to be voted on. I want to talk a little bit about the SOA dollars. We qualified for that amount based on the change in our student populations. The needs of our students have gone up, and this money is specifically to address those needs. So that's the additional, the counselors, the reading support, the ELD teachers, the special education support goes directly to speak to our needs, the changes in our needs, and then this money, DESE has determined that we qualify for. The additional, yes. Questions?
Is that the state money?
So the SOA money, I'm sorry, is the Student Opportunity Act, and it is part of the Chapter $70, yes.
Because I just heard from someone I went to the orientation with that the state is cutting back on that seriously.
This was,
No, I mean,
Yeah,
that's
I
what I
know.
heard, that's why I'm asking.
yeah, I'm just, no, this is money that was approved through the House, the Senate, and then the governor signed off on it. In August, we had a preliminary, the number didn't change in April, but because it hadn't been completely voted on, we wanted to wait. It's now voted, and so this money is money that comes to founding schools
For this year.
for this year and future. There's, we talked from the town, and I mean, they have assured us that this money it will continue, that this will not change. It may not go up, but this will be a part of our baseline money from the state.
There's another school district that got cut on money, that's why I was just asking.
Can only go by what they've assured us.
I hope so.
Terry.
Could you just rephrase how it is we qualified?
It's based on our student needs. So our
Student
increase,
needs,
yeah,
okay.
the increase of our economically disadvantaged, our English language learners.
The ones that we break
yeah.
down the categories for?
Yes,
Those,
yes.
those, okay.
Yes, because that has grown, these dollars were, it's a formula. And so it was based on the increased number of students we have in this categories. Yes.
Thanks.
And, okay, any questions that I might be able to answer at this point?
Leah.
I guess I don't really have a question. I just want to, today at the budget subcommittee, we were talking about the power of these slides, right? Of giving a picture of who our students are around looking at our budget, and that we want our budget to always be student centered, right? This is what it's about. So I think I just wanted to note that, and that I think that was it. I had something else with that, but I just wanted to say that to the group because I thought that, I was thinking about these slides in how you could present future budgets and really what our needs are. So that's it.
Terry.
On that same theme, people may say, well, Falmouth's losing students, so you need less teachers, but this magnifies why that's not true. Because there are so many other things that you do besides just buying new math books nowadays. Okay, it's more than reading, writing, and arithmetic, right?
And you remembered your
I
thought, Leah.
do, and thank you, Terry. That like clicked it right for me. I was thinking something that might help, and I'm just kind of throwing it out there, is giving a sense of, so when we see this increase in needs, so for example, an English learner, understanding kind of legally what we are entitled to be providing as equitable instruction. I think that helps in the context of why we need additional funds when our student demographics change. Because I think it's hard for people to understand that, we need a qualified teacher to teach listening, speaking, reading, and writing in English for a student who is just learning English. And that is an additional person. And the state has acknowledged this with the SOA money, but that doesn't mean that actually is enough for us to sustain what we need. And then that kind of ties me to, Margaret, what you might have heard, because all districts have gotten different funding, and some people have not gotten funding with this, depending on what their needs are.
Yeah, I was
So-
thinking maybe it's relief.
If a district had decreased in their student body and also decreased in their student needs, there's the potential that they could not have as much money. But as we just saw, this is an increase for us, and the state has recognized that with that. So I was just thinking that maybe putting some sort of like picture in that around like kind of our obligations, both legally and thinking about the student needs is important, because it's not like we have a choice around some of these things, you know, and though we try to always think about every individual student, what they need, but there are laws around this and things that we have to do.
So that's a very good point. I'm actually glad you brought that up, because certainly around special education and our ELD, we do have legal obligations. Could we be a district that possibly wouldn't add additional counselors? I certainly hope not, because I hope that's not who we are. We know that if our students are presenting with challenges, that we are going to respond to those. So yes, to answer your question, there are some legal responsibilities, and then to me, there's some ethical and moral decisions for our students. And I hope that we're covering all of that.
Yeah. And I think that could be a nice addition to the numbers.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Margaret.
Well, I just also want to piggyback what you said. If you don't respond to the social emotional needs, then
We'll
you're
have,
not going
the
to
other needs
succeed.
will grow.
Then you're not going to succeed
Yes,
academically.
exactly.
So it's not just a moral issue, it really
Yes.
is
But it
also
is
an
an
academic
academic
issue.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? There are Zoomers, I don't see any hands going up. Anything else in your report, your update?
Thank you.
Okay.
Well,
You have your
yeah,
presentation.
yeah, that's my update. Yes, I
Yes,
know.
yes, your presentation.
Okay.
Okay. Next is to act on policies AC, ACR, BBA, BBBB, GBA, GBAA, GCF, IJ, JB, JFBB, JIC, and JICA. So as you may recall, we had the first read last meeting, and essentially these policies were revised to include language for the Crown Act that has been recently adopted. So because this is the same language, the motion can be combined to encompass all of the policies. So is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve policies AC, ACR, BBA / BBBB, GBA, GBAA, GCF, IJ, JB, JFBB, JIC, JICA.
Thank you. This is mouthful, and Andrew will second. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, it'll be a roll call vote. Mike Halen.
Halen, yes.
Kelly.
Welch, yes.
Leah Palmer, yes.
Karen Maderos, yes.
Sandra Thorald, yes. Melissa Keith, yes.
Susan, yes.
And Natalie Cantalopoulos also yes. And now back to Superintendent for her update.
Thank you. So in your packet, you will find an update by Dr. Giovanni Santa. She has provided, we shared that we would get some additional data. So the overall staffing was one of the requests, and so you have some data on that. And then she also provided the ongoing positions, open positions, and then our current open positions. So there are some additional positions in that. Update by Alex on the T-ticket route.
Sure. First of all, I would like to say delivering the good news, and the good news is the project is on time and it's on budget.
Excellent.
When I say it's on budget, the project was about 3.7, and we spent about 2.8, and we have about $900,000 balance to pay the project, and we've left with front door installation and a fund resource that they have to come back and do it around November. So I'm here to present the good news that we're on time and we're on budget.
Thank you. We like your news and budget. Oh, Kelly, your hand is up.
I just want to say those are the magic words. Thank you, Alex.
Yeah. All right, there you go.
Okay, and I just wanted an update on the staff listening session that I had on October 17th. There were really 3 areas of discussion during the session. Safety monitors. We had some discussions around that people are seeing the safety monitors around, and it certainly makes for comforting knowing from the staff, but also staff that have children in the schools. But then there was also the other perspective during that meeting is that the teachers should just learn how to close the doors and they should be helping to do all the checks around the schools. So there was a healthy discussion around that. So just that'll be ongoing through this year, as well as, obviously we'll have updates here. Student academic supports, just some, talking about the needs of students, and then moving into the class sizes. It was pointed out that our staff are very appreciative that we're keeping our staff size or class sizes low, especially as we're trying to see some recovery over the past years. So that was a decision that we had made as a district, and we got some good feedback around that. And then the last update, I just would really like to recognize and publicly thank the Wampanoag tribe for their partnership and the performances over last week and today, celebrating the Indigenous Peoples' Day. Again, they came back and shared the music and the dance with all of our students, and our students were just enthralled. I'm going to ask Henry if he wants to share a little bit more, but before I do, I have to tell you, the dances are beautiful. One of the things that really touched my heart was at the end, at every school, they invite students up and join hands. And speaking about Henry's vision that he set for us about the belonging and our beloved community, it feels that way, right? To have everyone kind of come together. But Henry, give us some details.
Yeah. So I'll tell you, it was a powerful event. We went to 7 schools, 3 days, and there were dancers that came from as far as Connecticut. They took class time, sorry, not class time, work time, but yeah, there were a couple students that did take days off from school to be part of. So this was it's at a cost to a lot of our dancers, and they were amazing. I love the kids that were engaged. They're sitting down and they're engaged, and when they said, "Who wants to come and dance?" hands went up. Kids were excited. I know some teachers were like, "Oh, come here, come." I was like, "No, keep them going," because they were so engaged, and I was so proud of our students that were respectful and just honoring these dancers. I ended up each one with the why. Why are we doing this? And so I told the kids, we're doing this because for 2 reasons. Sometimes when we just concentrate on one culture, we think that this land is all about just one culture. And it's very important, and I think it does the students a disservice if they don't understand the vastness of this land and their different cultures. And so I think that was very important, that they need to know this, that there are people still here, and that's why I love that they say, we are still here. The Wampanoags are saying, we are still here, and it's very important for us to be part of that. Another aspect is that when students come in and they, again, only see one culture, we only show one culture, it takes away from the sense of belonging. I think once we start looking at other cultures and we give respect to various cultures, then we say this place is a place that is welcoming to all people. And I always end up with the students, are we a place, are we a school of belonging? And they shout, yes, we are. I think having these aspects to show them that we are welcoming them, but especially we're welcoming that student too, because they may have this, do I fit in this school? I think when we reach out to others, this idea of belonging means to them as well, at each individual school. So it was powerful. I don't know. We had some guest speakers. Guest Melissa was there, and she goes, "Please invite me next time." I think you were. I think you probably could add to that.
Thanks. I was actually going to raise my hand to ask to speak to that. I had the pleasure of being at the Lawrence School presentation. I was so impressed with the dancers. I was so impressed with the gentleman who was originally from Wisconsin,
who's now relocated here with his brother, and they brought their family drum, and the way that they describe their drum is that they treat it like a person and a family member, and the drum sits up front in the car, and they really take care of it. And it's an instrument, but it's also really a part of their family and who they are. And I felt very touched by that for a number of reasons. I loved to see the children's interaction. I loved to see the dancers perform. I thought that they were very proud of what they were doing, and I was very proud for them. You've all heard me say this before, I'm a little salty that we didn't have this when I was a kid, you know, being from here and not really knowing the culture that's our neighbor. And it's so important that we're doing this now, and I'm grateful. I wish that we could do more of it. I wish that we had more of the Wampanoag immersion education embedded in Falmouth. For a variety of reasons, but I think that this is a step, and I think that we're doing great work with this, and I'm really proud of it. My own children, we kind of came back later that evening, and we, you know, talked as a family about it, and I was really getting their perspective was also interesting. And they, you know, they had so that they saw it last year, and there were some changes to this year, and they said that they thought this year was better than last year. So I'm grateful that I was able to attend.
The partnership is going to continue. On Thursday, we'll be getting together and trying to see what we can do differently. And I like just mention that, you know, why wasn't it going on when you were growing up. I'm going to say this. They mentioned this in 1978, it was illegal. And so when you have hundreds of years of saying you can't do it, yeah, now you're free to show up. It probably takes a couple of years before that they can show it out to the public, and then now they're coming out, and now they're bringing people together. So I'm excited for this partnership. It's really I hope we can nurture that partnership.
We actually talked about that as a family later on, and my husband and I were telling the kids about, you know, I remember when the powwow kind of not came to be, but really they were promoting it to the public. And in the beginning, I think I felt like I was going as like I don't want to say a spectator, but like I was in a place that was sacred that I shouldn't be. And now that's really not the way I feel. I really feel like, you know, the tribe is really proud of what they are and who they are. And I'm really proud to, you know, come and be a part of, you know, learning and getting better as a society.
Thank you.
All right, and then just a couple announcements. So you know that I have a student advisory each year, a different group of students. And this year I'm doing a little bit different. So I've grouped our elementary students with Morris Pond. And our session is this Thursday, October 27th. And then I have a group of 7th and 8th grade students that I will be going to Lawrence to meet with. And then I have a group of 9 to 12-year-old, grades 9 to 12, sorry. And I will be going to Clipperton to meet with them. And these will be, you know, a set group of students that I meet with across the year. As I've done in the past, but I've just grown the number of students and kind of broken down by age groups. So all of those are starting up soon. So I'll be meeting with that. So I hope I'll have a report on the outcomes of our conversations. This Friday.
How are students selected for the student advisory?
So it's done at the school level, and they send their names in to us, and we go from there.
The students do, or are they recommended from teachers, or how does
recommended from teachers, and it goes to the principal, and then comes to us. I actually do not select them. I get very excited about once I get to meet them at the other. So and then this Friday we're doing a school tours at T-Ticket, Morris Pond, and Lawrence School for members of the finance committee and the school committee members. So we look forward to that. we are going to arrange one specifically for the high school on a different day. So I was trying to hit an elementary, you know, pre-K through up through grade 8, and then we'll do the high school tour. And then my coffee hours are starting again, and so November 1 from 5 to 6 right here in this room. So I hope we have lots of parents and staff are always welcome as well. So that's my update. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Andrea?
Just a quick question. Lori, when you were talking about the listening session with staff, so the topics that you outlined here, is that a summary of the topics that came up, or were those the topics presented to be discussed? Or is it open-ended or?
Oh, it's open-ended. That's what they came to speak about. Yes. Good clarification. Thank you.
Any other questions? Margaret?
I wonder how they responded to, said, you know, encouraged them to participate and making sure doors were locked and stuff like that. I wondered how they responded to that.
To this, it was really just, it was a discussion between two people that were, that one felt staff should take ownership.
Okay.
And the other staff member that spoke up said that they felt very, they felt secure, and they felt their child was secure by having someone that was constantly walking the grounds of the schools. So it was just, I was trying to give the two perspectives. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none. Next is routine business, approved school committee minutes of October 11th, 2022. Is there a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the school committee minutes of October 11th, 2022.
And a second? Margaret, yes. Any edits to the meeting minutes? No. Okay, seeing that, it'll be a roll call vote. Kelly?
Welch, yes.
Michaela?
Yes.
Leah?
Leah Palmer, yes. Jeremy Maderos, yes.
Andrew Carl, yes.
Let's keep yes.
Susan, yes.
And I'm abstaining since I was not at that meeting. Next, committee member reports. Harry?
Okay, so Melissa and Kelly and I are going to each say a little bit about our first listening session that was done by the people assigned to the goal of communication in our school committee. I don't know if they're called subcommittees now, whatever they are. What we did, what I want to reiterate is that the school committee, when they go to these things, they go as listeners, and they take the information that people bring forth. And I met with Lori last week, and I gave her the topics that people wished her to consider. So that's how that worked. And Kelly will start.
I'm right. Yep,
Okay.
I'm all
Good.
queued up. Thanks. So the goal itself focuses on two-way communication. So as you know, we've been doing like the videos and trying to get information out from our meetings, but then this piece was collecting and listening to feedback. And the second part of the goal is that it focuses on equity, making sure that all voices have the opportunity to be heard. And so we had three pieces, as you might remember, for the listening sessions. One was at the high school during Clipper time to get student voice. The second was after school with staff to hear student voice. And then the third was for families in the evening. And we did make a point of having childcare and translation services available for our family session. So we could be sure to make to hear voices from people who might need childcare, which is a lot of our people since they have kids, and also non-English speakers. And I'm turning it back to who's going first, Melissa.
Thanks. So I just wanted to report on some of the themes that we heard from the staff session. I also want to say that this was a big day. I was grateful to be a part of it, and we heard some really great themes. Some of the themes of the staff session that we heard from were college course credit, professional development, cost of living, administrative new positions, teacher assistant positions, and belonging means being inclusive of everyone. Those are some of the themes that were spirited at times and passionate, and that there were other things mentioned as well, but those are some of the ones that really kind of stood out.
Okay, so I will talk about the other two groups. In the Clipper Time session, two things were brought out. One was that algorithms for scheduling classes, now I had to really think about that word algorithm, I'll check, but the algorithms for scheduling classes sometimes prevent taking desired courses. Sometimes singletons overlap, that's kind of what that breaks down to. And they were also concerns about vaping in the bathrooms. Okay, moving along to the parent session. The themes were that there are numerous music opportunities in our district. Homework policies, balance the use of technology, milk being available at lunches, buses, and how parents can help teachers. So, as I said, we showed this to Lori and we were there for her consideration.
Just a quick clarification, milk not being available or?
There's a misunderstanding about the availability of milk. After I spoke with Lori, there was, maybe Lori can say.
I still need to follow up about
Okay.
this year, but in the past, it had been over the last couple of years with the free lunches. If you brought your lunch, could you get the free milk with that? And we did provide that. I just want to make sure that I get clarification that nothing has changed for this year. I have not been able to find that answer out there.
Yeah.
But we certainly want to make sure that every child gets milk at once.
Thank you for the clarification, Andrea.
So thanks for giving that update. I guess I was just to assess these sessions, how many people were at each of them?
Okay, the staff had between 40 and 45 members at the Clipper Time, and I was really surprised to get 16. And they were very different. They were different age groups. It was truly, and Henry will be happy, a diverse group of kids there. Okay, and there were about 10 parents and 2 staff at the last session.
And I do want to add that I think from the student session and from the parent session, we heard from every single person. Every single one contributed something to the conversation.
Thank you, the three of you, for reporting on that. Any other, committee member reports, Terry?
Okay, I have 2 other things I would like to report on. One is the monthly meeting of BBBs. I want to say they are a remarkable organization. It's hard to narrow things down to what are important, but at last meeting, they reported on that the BBBs had sent out a student engagement survey. This year, all the students got it. Last year, it was only 9th and 10th graders. And among the data collected was that over 90% who completed these surveys felt that they had at least one staff member that they could go to if they had a personal problem. So that's a pretty important statistic, I think. The other thing that was discussed, one of the other things that was discussed was the college mentoring program. It's amazing, all the different aspects of it. Again, I'm going to turn to Henry and say they really try to help kids that have language difficulties and things like that. There's $77,000 from last year's scholarships that are used for this program. There are 10 of these just geared to college mentoring activities. There are 17 students, and they do everything from helping them fill out the FAFSA forms to writing college essays, which the whole school is, they give opportunities now for the whole school, not just people in this, of these 17 students, to get help in writing the whole college essay. And the big thing is the amount of time they take doing field trips to schools with kids. It's amazing how much time. And the third thing from that meeting was to announce the October Student Volunteer of the Month, who this month is Corey Martin.
Great, thank you.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes,
while I'm on a roll here?
you have it.
You've heard me say that whenever we do our listening things, we go to the schools, that would be nice if we could have good things and off the cuff things. Well, I was waiting for clicker time to begin, and so it varies from day to day exactly what time it is. It varies off by 10 minutes or so. So anyway, I didn't want to be late, so I was hanging around the halls, and there was a student kicking a funny shaped soccer ball. So I said to him, you know, what are you doing? And he was practicing to give his report on it. So I stuck my head in the classroom and said, that the teacher said he was taking a long time. And I said, it's my fault because I was talking to him. And so one thing after another, I asked the teacher if I could go in and listen to their projects, not that day because it was short notice, but I talked to Dr. Harris. And he said, okay, so I went in and I want to say thank you to Mr. Cousins' third period science class, who was doing biomimicry. And I was just blown away by the simple things that they thought of, like using the flight of bats to help lengthen the time that drones are in the air because their batteries go. So, and then there was how fireflies inspired LED lights. And the one that was amazing because it was a really hard to put together project was using the same methods that fish use to get some oxygen out of the water. If humans could add that to their capabilities underwater, it would, would be helpful. So I just want to say the whole class was creative. I'm sorry, I only mentioned 3 of them, but I thank them for going in there. I hit Peter. Got in to see the kids, so.
Thank you, Terry.
Mhm.
Kelly.
Just 2 quick committee reports. Leah already mentioned that budget subcommittee met today with the FinCom, with our representatives from FinCom, and had our first chance to talk a little bit about the next year's budget. And also negotiation subcommittee is meeting this week in arbitration with FEA Unit A. That's it.
Yeah, mediation, not arbitration, but yes, we are.
Oh,
meeting
thank you. Yep.
Negotiation this Thursday. Leah.
Just an update around so we did the evaluation workshop, I would say, is that workshop? And in that workshop, we talked about the formative assessment, which is the mid-year check-in. And I created a document based on that feedback that has the goals, and it's just the narrative. But I did keep there were some ranking boxes. I kept them there because we decided to keep them. But that is going to be part now, Terry, of the timeline. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So, and it's an option to do the formative assessment, the mid-year cycle report, or observations, right? Or both.
So we have two take it under your own control documents. One's the observation and one's the. And I don't know if our chairman thinks we should show that to the public because it's a new thing or not. You can let the subcommittee know.
We will follow, we'll circle back on that. Any other committee member reports? I just have a quick reminder that our next school committee meeting will be on Monday, November 14th at 6 o'clock at Warren School, right before town meeting. That's usually our short 1-hour meeting, but I just want to make sure we have that date on our calendars now. Any requests for information? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn? And a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Andrew seconds, and roll call. Kelly.
Welch, yes.
Michael.
Yes.
Yeah.
Leah Palmer, yes.
Karen Medeas, yes.
Sandra, oh, yes. We'll speak, yes.
Susie, yes.
And Natalie Kalopoulos also yes. Have a great evening.